last week.
Wow, she's amazing.
Yeah, she is. She's doing a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, we are live. Oh, great. Oh, hello, Nivritti.
Hi, Bhima. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to do this. For those who haven't watched any of these before, I wanted to just explain what I just explained to you, which is that this is a series of interviews of different members of Ananda Sangha up here. And we're just going to trace the thread, the spiritual thread of each of our friends' lives here. And the main objective is just to give each of us kind of a window, perhaps we don't have, into the people here up here at Ananda in Seattle and Kameno. But hopefully it'll be inspiring for you as well. So Nivritti, you are a Nayaswami up here. You're a founding member of Ananda in this area. Just wanted to start out with, what kind of a child were you? Were you playful? Were you energetic? Were you thoughtful?
Yeah, adventuresome. I think that's probably the word that describes me as adventuresome. I was raised in New Hampshire, in the country. We had a lot of acreage. It wasn't a farm, but we had for animals, but we had a big garden, and of course lots of snow in the winter. And we had a cottage by one of the tons of lakes in that area. So we just had a small cottage. So I grew up basically outdoors. Our nearest neighbors we couldn't really even see. And so my older sister and I were kind of like best friends. And we still are in many respects. So adventuresome. Yeah, I always wanted to get out there and explore and jump off roofs into the big snowbanks and jump out of my parents crazy. I jump out of the second story window down into the snowbanks. Winter actually was a good thing because we couldn't get the door open. The snow had blown it shut, and we couldn't open it. The snow was drifted against it. So I said, I'll do it. I'll jump out the window. So I jumped out the second story window and slid down the roof and into the snowbank and just kind of swam around the house and shoveled out the doorway enough so that we could actually open the door. So just that kind of stuff. I don't know. I was always doing kind of different things, traveling over through the woods and over the river, that one, but just going as far as I could, as fast as I could, and my poor sister keeping up with me. And we just would explore all over. Our parents were very liberal. They just kind of let us go. We had some topo maps. So we'd follow the stone walls and the maps, and we'd pick out a spot and we'd get there and eat the lunch that was tied to our waist, and then we'd figure out how to get back. So we always did. And I remember one incident which was very special to me when I was out actually by myself. My sister wasn't with me this time. I was probably, 6th, 7th grade, somewhere in there. And I remember just hiking up the hill that was close by and, did that a lot. And it was a beautiful day. And I lay down on some moss. And I just remember, there's a little bit of a view there, and it was so quiet and special. I loved, that was my spirituality. There's no doubt about it, being in the outdoors. And it was a communion that I wasn't aware was happening, actually. But I looked up in this tree, and there was a bobcat right above my head in the tree. And, bobcats aren't that big. They're not cougars or anything, but they're still big cats. And he was just as still as he could be. And he was looking right at me. And I just remember feeling this connection with this bobcat. And it was so sweet. There was just this love feeling of, that I got. And, who knows? These things just kind of happen. It was a special experience. You don't forget those things. So that was
Did your sister relate to that same kind of a spiritual experience that you had in nature? Or?
Not as much so. No, not as much so. She was more the one that she just liked following me around a little bit that way, and because it was fun. We would enter into some of the summer homes. I mean, we did things that probably aren't so. Probably shouldn't relate, but we never got caught or in trouble. But it just had, we just had the whole outdoors to relate to, and that's what we did. until around high school, and then there was a lot of study, and things started to change. So, but the first 8 years, grammar school up through junior high, was kind of a free for all in terms of outdoors. I remember in the winter, especially a lot of winter, we'd ice skate all over the ponds. And one time it was a big, oh my gosh, this was really probably the most dangerous thing I did was ice skating onto this. Actually, I took my skates off because the ice was so thin, but I wanted to get out to the middle of this bog, which was iced over. Have you ever seen the black ice? And you can actually see down through it. And it was so special. I was following this little nymph thing that was going under the ice, and I had to get down on my stomach, and I was swimming on my stomach because the ice was kind of bouncing up and down. It was all plastic because it was so thin. But I could kind of swim, and so I didn't fall through. And my sister didn't follow me there. She was scolding me and I shouldn't have done it. But anyway, it was so much fun following this little bug as he crossed, underneath the ice where I was, things like that. Just those nice memories of. But she was the practical one and helped me not to do anything too bad, I guess.
So you were a jump headfirst type person growing up.
Yeah.
And your parents, you mentioned that feeling of love that you felt from the bobcat and this experience of wonder. Did your parents nurture that in you, or were they present? Did you share with them those experiences, and did they have kind of spiritual lives?
Actually, not. No, It was. Being outdoors in a way was actually an escape from, a family life that wasn't really as nurturing and as helpful as it probably could have been. But I mean, I don't blame them. It was what it was. And luckily they let us, be outside a lot.
Find your own path.
Yeah, find our own path. No, there was very little of that. My dad's father was a minister, and his grandfather was a very famous Episcopal minister through a Cambridge, teaching in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But his dad, he was actually a Episcopal minister, and he actually spent time in Oklahoma with the Indians as and so that was kind of a good thing to hear about. But my dad was fed up with being an altar boy and religion, and he wiped it clean. So there was nothing there. So no, it was, my spirituality was just my connection with the outdoors and nature and mountains in particular. I always wanted to hike mountains, and New Hampshire has some great mountains. When we got old enough to drive, we spent a lot of time up in the White Mountains hiking Mount Shakora or Mount Washington. One of the first trail we went up was the hardest one, of course, because that's what we wanted, or I wanted to do. So anyway, we did that many times. People die over there. We were Divine Mother was watching us and helping us. I know she was taking care of me in particular, I think. So yeah.
And you've climbed many of the peaks here in the Cascades. Do you have any stories to share about some of those experiences? Because I know a lot of people haven't been that high up and haven't had that experience before. What's that like to be up on one of these big volcanoes?
That's one reason why I'm out here was because I wanted to, when I did come out here, because I got a job as I got my master's in outdoor education. Back then, there was no such thing as environmental education. It was outdoor education. So I had a job. I found out about a program out here. And so I came out, and they gave you board and room. I was way up in the Mountain Loop Highway out of Silverton, if you know about that. There's no electricity, well, we had some running water, but it was cold, no warm anyway. It was I just was loving it. It was so neat. And we had 5th and 6th graders in an outdoor program through the Everett School District. So that's how I started. And when I had some time off, I was up hiking all the mountains in that area. And when I finally found my job with Kent School District as an outdoor education director at that time, I started right off that way with their outdoor school program they had. And anyway, I'm here. I was here. But it was interesting because I almost wasn't here, because this was in 1971 when there were signs all over the place. Last one out of Seattle, turn off the lights. Boeing had this huge layoff, and I mean, you could drive downtown Seattle and it was dead. There was nobody there. You could park anywhere. It was amazing. So I lucked out, and I was heading back home. I had $50 left in my car, and I was with a gas credit cards. I thought I could make it back to New Hampshire, and I was on my way. And it was interesting, in Boise, Idaho. I passed. This was back before the freeway was through there. It was just a secondary road, and I passed a gas station, and there was a phone booth. They had them back in those days, and I remember thinking, well, I'm just going to call back and see if by any chance, I got that job that I'd applied for with Kent School District. And I just happened to call back the person that I was staying with. And I said, I just got this urge to call. I said, I hear I am in Boise, and she said, yeah, they want you for an interview. And of course, there were no cell phones back then. So,
yeah.
If I hadn't stopped,
yeah,
I wouldn't have gone. So that incident, I went right back. And very next day, I got an interview and got the job. That was
the next day.
I wouldn't have been here. So that was interesting. But yeah, the mountains. I joined the Seattle Mountaineers, and ended up taking the climbing course to start with. I never start at the basic. I start with the top. Anyway. And I just loved it. We did all sorts of rock climbing and rappelling and all that kind of stuff, and we did climb the peaks. We did Baker, and I had a small personal party that I did some climbing with, and we tried to climb Mount Rainier, but on different routes, not the standard routes, and we got weathered off. The first time the weather was so bad that the Park Service won't let you go. If you have to get the permit. And the second time the avalanches were so bad they wouldn't let us go. And it takes a lot to mount one of those climbs, and so things happened, and I never got around to making that happen again. But Mount Hood, Glacier Peak, a lot of the biggies. But the more fun ones are. They're just kind of a trudge, And jumping down in crevasses was fun. Part of our training was to actually jump down into a crevasse, and you hang there, and then you press it up. And that was very spiritual. Actually, it was a very spiritual experience to be down in that crevasse.
How so?
It was so quiet. It was like you could hear. I didn't know anything about Om at that time. This was before my time for that, but I could hear Om. It was this reverberating, it wasn't a sound, but it was a presence that was there. And I remember I didn't want to get out of that crevasse. It was so special. Yeah. And the blue, everything was this gorgeous blue down there, because I wasn't so deep that there was still light coming down. Yeah.
Astral.
Anyway, all those things are nature, and it kind of is what set my earlier years before I actually, found what it was I was looking for. I spent 10 years. The first 10 years I was teaching school, doing this outdoor stuff, but I was also doing a lot of self-help programs in the 1970s. It was big. EST was the big one, but I did the Pursuit of Excellence. I did what was the other one? Anyway, and they have different levels. And it was during those experiences that I began to understand there was something, I was always looking, I was finding it. And it was one of those experiences where this was actually towards the end of the program. We were up at a retreat up in Alpental, would you believe, up at Snoqualmie Pass. And we were supposed to go out and just commune with nature. And I thought, this is really easy with me. I'll just go sit and talk to a tree. But as I was looking around for something, grass grabbed me, this big clump of grass. That's all I can say. It was, there's that kind of high, tall grass up in that area. I had a real spiritual experience. I had there was this tugging in this area. I didn't even know what was going on. This is now I know it's a spiritual eye, but from here and this tugging in this area, I felt this ray of light just coming out, and I just merged into this grass,
Wow.
And I just remember feeling the joy. The tears were just running down my eyes, and I just felt one with the grass. And then I was realized, I was looking to commune with a tree. I didn't want to commune with grass. The grass communed with me. And I just felt, it was just the most wonderful experience to be part of that grass. I was flexible and I was joyful, and, I don't know how to describe it. And it didn't last very long. It was probably only a minute or two. And then I was realizing that I was back where I was, but it was just the tears of joy. I mean, at that moment, I remember thinking, I think I'm supposed to find God. That's what I'm looking for, because 10 years of looking, it was so hard, and I thought that was it. I said, I think I'm supposed to find God.
And you used that word, the G word?
I used that word in my thoughts. Yeah, I think I'm supposed to find God. And I remember I told my husband that, and he looked at me like I was, he said, oh yeah, of course, but didn't believe me, because I never associated all my experiences necessarily with spirituality. It was always just something
out there.
Yeah. Something I liked, something was exciting, but suddenly spirituality was it, and that started it. I went to the the Church of Religious Science back in those days, and realized I wanted to meditate, and they wouldn't take they didn't meditate deep enough. I wanted to really meditate. I really felt a draw to meditate at that point, and I found I was reading books, but at that particular church where I was going, they had a little boutique, and I was perusing the boutique, and there it was, there was the AY picture, and I'd been reading Life and Teaching of the Masters and a few of these other books, but I thought, oh wow, I want to read this. And I opened it up, and just like Swami, it was an American saint, Luther Burbank, and I thought, what? No American saints. But anyway, I didn't spend much time on that one, and I just started reading it, and honestly, that book was like that experience with the grass. I mean, the tears would come down my eyes, and I held the book to my chest, and I'd walk around, and just, my husband, he thought I had lost it or something.
Yeah, I bet.
And anyway, that was it. And I just had to have more. And, I called SRF, and of course they said I had to take the lessons, and perhaps in 4 years I'd be ready, but I wanted Kriya now. I'm not someone that likes to wait. So I wanted it now. And so I remember I teamed up with a Buddhist group. This was before East West, and there wasn't a lot around. So I went to this Buddhist meditation group. It was really very lovely downtown in Green Lake area. And one of those meditations afterwards, then the teacher would talk about Buddhism, but it was very nice. And one time he had some flyers. He was passing out some flyers, and I had been meditating, whatever, the best I could. And this flyer, it was like slow motion. I always remember this feeling. All of a sudden, this flyer was like slow motion coming down into my lap. And I looked down at it. I picked it up, and there was Master's face, picture of Master, and it said Kriya Yoga Preparation Classes. And it was one of Asha Praver's class. I still got this original class flyer here that was put out. There was a meditation group around at this time.
That was the one?
This wasn't the flyer that fell in my lap, but this was the series of classes. She used to come up and do a series of classes for a week.
Yeah.
And the only one that he was advertising on that flyer that I remember, all I remember was Kriya Yoga Preparation. And it says right here, Kriya Yoga Preparation for Initiation. And it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday class. So that's the first thing I went to was a Kriya. And then, of course, Asha told me about the meditation group, and I mean, that was it. I was sold, and I was part of the meditation group from then on. This was that when I first found Ananda. In other words, was this class. This is when I learned about Ananda, and it was from this class that Asha taught, and it was May 1984. Yeah,
I
May
see.
1984 was when I found Ananda through that class.
And were you with Joel and Michelle?
Yes,
Was that the Buddhist group?
that was the Buddhist group,
Okay,
and they
great.
were wonderful. Yeah, they still are around, aren't they?
They're still around. And they've been big supporters of East West even recently. So
Yeah, they used to do programs with us, and very spiritual people. I mean, at
hmm
that time Michelle wasn't there; it was just Joel, but
hmm
very, very special people. So yeah, so that's how I found Ananda, and through Asha's class and Kriya Yoga, and I actually 6 months later she let me take Kriya.
yeah, well,
We
you
didn't
jumped
have
right in again.
3 days of preparation, and but then she had me doing the techniques,
Yeah.
so I practiced very diligently,
hmm
and so then I went down to Nanda Village and took Kriya with Swami Kriyananda.
He was doing the initiation then?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
he was.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Oh, wow. What a blessing.
yeah. It's the first time I met Swami. He was in his Swami robe and stuff, and in the dome, and it was the first time I met him when he gave me Kriya, just like that.
Wow.
So
And did he have the beard and the long hair and all that, or had he already trimmed
oh,
it? And
he didn't have long hair, as I remember. It was I don't remember the long hair. I think that was before.
yeah. So at this 3-day workshop with Asha, were there any other Ananda people that you remember to this day?
Actually, oh yeah, Mangala. Sulopa
Oh,
Powers.
okay. Yeah.
That was her very first class too. That was
Wow.
the very first time she found. So she and I became kind of the leaders of the meditation group.
hmm
Um, Karen Sherman was part of that meditation group. Devaki had left and gone back to the village, but Sulopa Powers at that time and myself, we kind of just grabbed that meditation group, and really helped nurture it along for 2 years until we could get the until
hmm
ministers would come.
hmm
So, and then Mangala moved to the village, and I stayed here. So, that's kind of what happened.
And who was it that came up to the ministers that came up? Was it there was two couples, right?
Yes, we were lobbying for one because we were so small. How can we afford them? But you just don't think about those things. So they sent Bent and Parvati. Now it's
hmm
Pranaba and Parvati,
Yeah.
who had just barely married. It was like they were newlyweds. And then they had Krishna Das and Uma. No, and back then it was Bill and Uma.
hmm
And so it was four of them, and we rented a little house right down there on 20th, which was real close to where we ended up with the bookstore. It's kind of
Right.
down the road.
20th and 65th, right off of there, right?
Yeah, 20th and somewhere. Yeah, it was towards the water, that
hmm
direction.
hmm
So and they immediately started a Raja class. Parvati was, in particular, was in charge, and they started a Raja class, and we found a little center. That's another whole story in itself. Oh my gosh, the little center that they found was on Highway 99 and 81st. Now, if you've ever been to Highway 99, 81st, it's not exactly an up and coming neighborhood. It's pretty darn raw, I guess. And we found this little, it was cheap. In other words, it was cheap. We had, there was no money. I mean, they didn't send those ministers with any money at all from the village. And so they were having to struggle to, and we were trying to struggle to pay for the house that they were living in, and, help them out a little bit with money because, they didn't have anything. So it was a real grassroots thing going on at that time. So this place we rented was, oh my gosh, it was, anyway, the story we tell is because it was the first Kriya that we did up here, a formal Kriya, and Parvati did it. And, so we had the white and the candles, and we had curtains on everywhere so you couldn't see outside. And, after it was over, and, we're feeling so, you just feel so uplifted. You get your rose petals and everything. And we opened the door and we had the curtains shut, so we didn't know. And it had actually been quite quiet. So we just opened the door, and there were these police cars parked in our parking lot, but they were raiding this apartment complex, which is probably subsidized housing type stuff right behind where our church was, that little strip mall thing we were in. Anyway, and there were policemen. They had guns drawn. They were knocking on the door, and we came out with our white, clothes on and our rose petals, and oh my gosh, and then we started hearing some noises, and the policemen shouting and stuff. So it was a raid. They were raiding
a drug raid.
A drug raid, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But,
those were the Ananda Wild West years.
It felt like the Wild West years, yeah. But that was before we actually had the Festival of Light. The Festival of Light came a couple of years after, we had the ministers. Well, maybe it was just a year after.
86, 87, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So we were actually had a different type of a program. It was before the festival. But I always remember when the first Festival of Light came, we had to learn but the person that was our guitarist had to learn. Carlton was his name, Carlton Shiner. He was a very great, really good guitarist. He had to learn the guitar chords and everything from a phone call, he said, and try to lead us in singing it because nobody could sing it. We didn't have the music. Anyway, it was probably a disaster, but we did our best. And I remember, and then afterwards, Benton Parvey sat us down and said, no, what do you, let's talk about the ceremony, because the festival was so different compared to what we'd been doing. Mm-hmm. It was before, it was like they were talking on different aspects of the path, Swami's book. And so it wasn't as, it was much looser the way it was done. So the festival was, it can back some people up. And sure enough, we had people that thought it was too Christian and too, formal, and they didn't like it, and all that stuff. But then we had a lot of people that did, a number of us. But I remember all I could say was I was so uplifted. I said I can't even really speak about it. I said I feel so uplifted. To me, that first festival was like God was speaking. I mean, it was incredible. I always remember it. So I got it, obviously. I got the vibes.
Yeah.
The vibes were there. So, and
luckily, you were ripe for it.
Yeah, I was ready. And luckily, obviously people got it because we're still doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Nivritti, I just have just a couple more questions for you. Now looking back, 1984 is coming on 40 years ago now. What has it meant to you to be here at Ananda, and specifically, what has it meant to you to be a disciple, and just maybe talk a little bit about that experience, because you were sharing some of the outer events and interesting stories, but just the inner experience of coming here and finding your home, your spiritual home. What has that meant now, looking back after almost 40 years?
Well, I've reflected on that probably quite a few times, because what I realize is what I am, what's happened to me, was not in my wildest dreams what I thought I would ever do or be. And yet when I look back on it, I remember all those years of looking. I was always searching. It was like nothing ever, the job was great, but it didn't work. It didn't satisfy. It was that feeling of what else? Relationship. Well, this is great, but what else? And on. Every time, we had a nice house and okay, but there's more. There's always that feeling that there's more. And now that I've had the path, all I can remember is just that's gone. It like,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm certain. Now I'm thinking trying to find God, of course, but I mean, now I know what it is. I don't have that feeling of emptiness because I didn't know what it was that I was looking for. And yeah, I could have fun and, feel good about things. But once I had the path, I remember when we started the bookstore, I mean, I quit my job. It was a good job, good salary with Lake Washington School District as a personnel administrator there. Um, but I could feel it wasn't the right thing. It's like there is something else. And, there's a whole story around the bookstore too that little,
We'll have to do another interview
we'll do
about
that
that.
if you want, but there was just one miracle after another, just one intuitive experience that I was so blessed to have. And, it's because that's what it is. It's like now I can stop searching out there and I can start searching inside. I can start working on what I know now is what I'm looking for. Have I found it? Well, you find the tools and then you got to work at it. So, yeah, no, it's just that was the difference. I felt so right. And, talking to my family, they didn't get it. I had to shut my mouth and stop talking. But, you just know when you know. Yeah. Yeah.
In your bones.
Yeah. Yeah. And everywhere,
Yeah.
and that's kind of been ever since. It's like, I just want to do what seems like the right thing to do, even though it sometimes it doesn't make any sense at all. And it can be very scary, but scary doesn't seem to be something that I've worried about in my life. So I just kind of dive in and just follow that feeling of that guidance that is really working with us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That guidance is there, and the more we can open to it, this older age that we're entering into now, some of us, it's a whole new ball game. It's like, no, now what,
Mm-hmm.
but was so is still, it never stops. Always following that inner voice, and that brings the most joy,
Mm-hmm.
always.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Nivritti.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I know we were talking earlier about doing something more comprehensive and getting kind of an Ananda Seattle history. So hopefully you and I can work together on that. I would love to be a part of that, and maybe we can, even interview Pranaba and Parvati and Krishna
Yeah.
Das and Uma, and just get their stories and make something really
Oh yeah, it'd
that
be
that
fun to
captures it all. Yeah.
grab them again, and actually, Puru and Lakshmi, Pranaban, and they only stayed a year.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
They went back for various reasons. Um, Uma and Krishnadas stayed a little longer, and then we had Maria and Dave Warner.
Mm-hmm.
And
Devarshi now.
Devashi now, yeah. So it was really Puru and Lakshmi that was when I was here. They were the main head ministers. I left soon after Riemann and Padma came. I think we crossed over about a year. And then I left for the village, and for my 4 years that I stayed at the village. So for me, that beginning year was pretty much Puru and Lakshmi. That's when we did this bookstore. We found the community. We had a lot of things happen during those years with them.
Wow. Well, we're gonna, I think we definitely need to get together and get some of the chronology and because it's just, I mean, what an epic story there is from the beginning of Asha just coming up and then a little group forming all the way through all these businesses and finding the community, and there's just a lot to share. So, well, thank you, Nivritti. I think that's about the time we have allotted for just this particular project. But thank you so much for sharing just that. It's so helpful, I think, for people, who've known you, but to see that progression of, there's a soul that's ready to be to find their path, and the inevitability of that. I mean, it was like you had that energy and that drive to find it, and I need to find it. And um, so for anybody who's watching this in years to come, um, I'm sure that from the mountains into the meditation room, something along those lines. What you seek is within you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. And I wish you the best on the project, and be fun to hear what other people have to say.
Totally. Totally. Okay. Thanks, Nivritti.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.